Hello, and welcome to the Spicy Pod Sleep Stories. I am Michael, and tonight, a snowstorm brought a broke violinist to the doorstep of one of Europe's most powerful financiers, trapped together in his luxurious St. Moritz estate. Desire ignites between them, fierce and uncontrollable. She's independent, fiery, and determined to resist. He is dominant, commanding, and unaccustomed to being denied. As the blizzard rages, subtle touches turn into stolen kisses, teasing into temptation, and control unravels completely. One night of passion leaves them both breathless, longing, and unable to forget each other. The storm arrived without warning. Curtain of white swallowed the Engadine Valley so completely. The mountains seemed to erase themselves from existence. Her tiny rentals skidded. Somewhere between St. Moritz and the audition hall at the Kulm, tires screaming against a road that no longer remembered it was a road. Elena braced both hands on the wheel. She could barely see the hood of the car, much less the turn she knew was coming. The violin case lay in the passenger seat, black, scratched, and stubbornly loyal. The only thing in her life that had never abandoned her. Then came the spin. Snow hissed under the tires, metal jolted, and with a shudder the car came to rest against a drift. The engine sputtered once, twice, and died. Silence pressed in, thick as the storm itself. Elena swallowed the panic rising in her throat. Typical. Of all weeks to audition for the Zurich Philharmonic, fate had chosen the one where the Alps decided to behave like the Arctic. Lights cut through the white, two fierce beams slicing across the road. A black SUV approached, unapologetically expensive, the kind that looked custom built for men who weren't used to hearing the word no. It pulled alongside her, tires humming with quiet authority. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, tall, dark coat whipping in the wind, boots crunching cleanly through snow. He didn't shout over the storm. He didn't ask if she was all right. He just opened her door and leaned in. "Get out," he said, low, controlled, with an accent that curled around consonants in a way that shouldn't have been sexy in a blizzard, yet somehow was. Elena blinked at him. "Excuse me?" He didn't repeat himself, simply reached in, unbuckled her seat belt, and lifted her with a strength that was precise rather than showy. He smelled of cedar, snow, and something darker. Something like the leather interior of a car that cost more than her life. Her violin case slipped. He caught it in the same motion, one-handed. "Move," he said, half guiding, half commanding her toward the SUV. His touch on her arm was firm, not rough, the kind of touch that expected obedience and was unused to resistance. Inside the warmth of the SUV, Elena felt her pulse hammering in places that had nothing to do with fear. "I had it under control," she muttered, lying more to herself than to him. He closed her door, circled the hood, and slid behind the wheel. Not even remotely. He shifted into drive. The SUV cut through snow like it was nothing. She should have thanked him. Instead, she crossed her arms, trying to regain some equilibrium. Do you always kidnap stranded musicians off mountain roads, or am I just lucky? His mouth curved, but not into a smile, more like amusement that never reached the eyes. If I were kidnapping you, you would not be asking questions. Heat shot straight to her stomach, infuriating, unwelcome, impossible to ignore. The storm howled against the windshield. He drove with the calm of a man who had never panicked at anything in his life. After a stretch of silence audition, she blinked. Yes, or was. Zurich Philharmonic. A pity, he said, as if the snowstorm were a personal inconvenience rather than a natural phenomenon. They left the main road and climbed. Wrought iron gates opened without him touching a button, as though they recognized him. Through the trees, lights appeared, warm, golden, extravagant. Not a chalet, not even a mansion, a full estate carved into the mountainside, glowing like an oasis trapped in winter. My estate, he said, as if anyone would have guessed otherwise. He escorted her inside without waiting for agreement. The foyer was all marble and heat and quiet wealth. Somewhere deeper in the house, a fire crackled. Elena's boots left melting prints on polished stone, tiny, intrusive, embarrassingly temporary. He took her coat. Their fingers brushed. Electricity, brief and sharp, snapped between them. Still no name. Still no explanation. He turned toward the great room, wordlessly expecting her to follow. She should have objected, demanded details, asked who exactly he was. Instead, she just followed. Firelight painted his features when he stopped near the hearth. Strong jaw, shadowed cheekbones, dark eyes that cataloged her in a way that didn't feel polite or harmless. Sit, he said, nodding toward the leather armchair closest to the flames. She didn't move. Some stubborn part of her refused to obey simply because he expected it. His brow lifted, not annoyance, interest. You're freezing. He stepped closer, the heat of him startling in contrast to the cold. Don't make it difficult. It wasn't the words, it was the tone. Low, commanding, unbothered by the concept of negotiation. She sat. He draped a blanket over her shoulders, not gentle, not rough, just certain. His fingers grazed the side of her neck, unintentional or intentionally unintentional. The contact sent a flush racing down her spine. Their eyes caught, brief, sharp, hungry in a way neither acknowledged. The storm outside screamed. The room was quiet, and for a moment, Elena wondered if the universe understood cruelty better than romance. because if desire was going to mess with her tonight, it had chosen a spectacularly inconvenient man to do it with. The night stormed on, rattling the windows until even the mountains seemed to shudder. Elena drifted into a shallow sleep by the fireplace, wrapped in warmth that didn't belong to her. When she woke, the fire was reduced to a soft amber glow, and the blanket smelled faintly of cedar and salt, and something dark she refused to label. For a moment she couldn't place where she was. The ceiling too high, the light too soft, the silence too thick to belong anywhere she had ever lived. Then memory returned in a rush of cold and headlights, and the man who didn't bother to explain anything at all. The estate was quiet, as though the world were holding its breath. Elena rose, stretching muscles stiff from half sleep. She smoothed her hair with her fingers, collected her violin case, and followed instinct toward the scent of coffee drifting through the air. Wealth had its own acoustics, soft footsteps swallowed by rugs, no hum of cheap appliances, no pipes clanking. She found the dining room by accident, and him. He sat at the head of the long table, a newspaper folded with military precision beside a cup of coffee. Morning light cut through tall windows, outlining him in pale gold. His presence filled the room before his voice ever could. "You're awake." Not a question, merely an observation, as though he kept track of everything that moved under his roof. Elena cleared her throat. "It appears so." He set down the paper, lifted his cup, and studied her over the rim. Not with curiosity, with assessment, like she was a problem to solve or a puzzle to enjoy. "Storm hasn't cleared," he said. "Roads are closed. No one is going anywhere today." She tried not to show how her pulse flickered. "My audition canceled, most likely." The blunt certainty stung harder than she expected. Music wasn't a hobby. It was her one bargaining chip against a life that never offered mercy. As if sensing the shift, he nodded toward a silver tray. "Eat." Her eyebrows rose. "You enjoy one-word commands, don't you?" His expression didn't change, but his eyes warmed with something close to amusement. "I enjoy efficiency." The tray held fruit, pastries that looked Parisian rather than Alpine, and a pot of tea whose steam curled in elegant ribbons. She chose a croissant, mostly out of stubbornness, unwilling to let him dictate anything else. They ate in silence, not comfortable, not hostile, but threaded with something that felt suspiciously like awareness. She could feel his gaze, even when it wasn't on her. After a few quiet minutes, she set the pastry down and dared, "May I ask your name?" He glanced at her once slowly, as if deciding how much truth to allow a stranger. "Laurent Caravel." The name hit harder than expected. She had heard it before, in financial headlines, whispered in European conservatories, attached to rumors about acquisitions and failed governments and private islands, always accompanied by the qualifier powerful, or worse, untouchable. The realization slid through her like cold water. You are... She didn't finish. She didn't need to. That subtle flicker at the corner of his mouth returned, a ghost of satisfaction, not vanity, certainty. Yes. So that was it. Not merely wealthy, not merely influential. One of those men whose phone calls shifted stock markets and whose presence at a gala rewrote guest lists. And she'd fallen asleep in front of his fireplace like a stray cat, invited in out of pity. Laurent set his cup down. You can explore the house if you wish. It's better than staring at snow. The dismissal was polite but final. Elena took it, though not for the reason he expected. Curiosity was a powerful force, especially in a world she'd never been allowed to enter. The estate unfolded like a novel, written for someone else entirely. High ceilings, vaulted corridors, tall windows overlooking a world lost in white. Everything was curated, art from private collections, furniture built to outlive its owners, rugs thick enough to mute even the loudest steps. Eventually, she found the music room. It called to her before she even saw it, the faint imprint of old performances lingering in the air, the smell of polished wood and rosin. A grand piano dominated the center, black and gleaming. She set her violin case on a chaise, opened it with reverence, and drew the bow across the strings. The first note hung in the room, pure and fragile, then another. Soon the storm outside became percussion for a melody she didn't consciously choose. She played until she forgot the estate, forgot Zurich, forgot the car spinning on ice. The music was warm and biting and alive. Everything she was and everything she feared she wasn't. When she finally lowered the violin, her breath caught. Laurent stood in the doorway. He didn't speak. He didn't applaud. He simply watched, eyes darker now, narrowed as though something inside him had shifted. He stepped closer, too close, close enough she could feel the heat that rolled off him, the storm that lived beneath the surface of his control. Your posture, he murmured. His hand lifted, slow, inevitable, deliberate. He adjusted her elbow, the stroke of his fingers trailing the inside of her arm just a little too long. Not accidental, not innocent. Something in her tightened. A beat passed, then another. The blizzard might as well have raged on Mars. The storm inside the music room was quieter but far more dangerous. The day never truly brightened. The storm blurred time, the way snowfall blurs sound, softening everything except tension. After the music room, Elena tried to pretend the moment with Laurent hadn't made her breath come short, or her skin hum in odd places. She tried even harder to pretend she didn't notice how he moved through his own estate, unhurried, decisive, as if ownership was simply a natural extension of being alive. She failed on both counts. By late morning, they crossed paths again in the hallway near the library. She wasn't looking where she was going. He rounded the corner without warning. The collision was slight, only her shoulder brushing against the firmness of his chest. But it sent a warm jolt through her nerves. "Careful," he murmured. She stepped back, cheeks warming in spite of herself. "You appeared out of nowhere." "I live here," he said dryly, and for the first time, something like humor flickered between them. Thunder rumbled somewhere in the mountains, not loud, just low and territorial. The windows quivered in their frames. Laurent glanced toward the view beyond the glass. "Storm's worsening," he said. "Blizzard warning extended through the night," meaning still trapped. Elena swallowed. Lucky me. This earned a look, one she couldn't decipher. Not disapproval, not amusement. Something else darker around the edges. The estate staff moved quietly in the background, restocking firewood, lighting lamps against the dim morning. No one lingered long. Whether out of respect or instinct, the house seemed to know when not to intrude. After lunch, a meal equally silent and equally charged, she retreated to a sunroom overlooking the courtyard. The glass panes were frosted with ice, framing the world in the shades of gray and white. She practiced scales softly, fingers nimble and sure, despite the cold in the air. Laurent appeared again, always unannounced, always too close for coincidence. This time, he didn't interrupt. He simply sat in an armchair, one ankle resting over the other knee, and listened. Listening changed him. His posture eased, his jaw unclenched, his eyes softened, though nothing else about him did. Men like him weren't used to being still. It made his stillness feel rare, intimate by default. "Your technique," he said finally when she paused to adjust her tuning, "is sharper than someone auditioning for small orchestras." Elena arched a brow. "Is that a compliment?" "An observation." She set her violin down, wiping a smudge from the varnish with her sleeve. "I don't have the luxury of being anything less than sharp." Laurent studied her again, head tilted slightly, as if he were deciding whether to ask the next question. He didn't. Instead, he stood, nodding once. "We're hosting a gala tonight," he said. "Annual winter fundraiser. Although with the storm, I doubt the musicians will reach St. Moritz in time." The statement hung there, deliberate as a chess move. Elena blinked. A gala during a blizzard? "We don't cancel," Laurent said simply. "People would take it personally." That told her everything she needed to know about his world, and very little about him. He didn't invite her, didn't need to. Curiosity was already doing half the work. Before she could ask more, he walked away. No goodbye, no explanation, just the quiet authority of a man who never doubted his next move. Evening arrived disguised as early dusk. Staff transformed the estate into a winter ballroom. Chandeliers turned low, candles trailing warmth across silver and crystal, violins and cellos set on empty stands like ghosts waiting for musicians who would never arrive. Elena stood at the balcony of the landing, watching the preparations as guests began to appear through the snow. Black cars, fur coats, sharp perfumes, and even sharper whispers. She saw Laurent at the entrance, greeting his guests. A slight bow of the head here, a handshake there, his expression a perfectly measured blend of welcome and distance. Powerful men didn't need to charm. Presence was enough. Below, champagne chimed against glass. Gold flickered, the scent of winter roses drifted through the halls. A woman brushed past Elena and murmured to a companion, "Caravel never misses a gala. Even storms submit for him." The words shouldn't have affected her. They did anyway. Their gazes found each other across the room. Laurent's eyes catching hers like a hook catching silk. Nothing overt, nothing improper, but the air tightened around the moment as if the house itself noticed. Elena swallowed lightly, fingers curling around the railing. Desire was no longer theoretical. It was proximity and heat and the sharp awareness that control had teeth. The storm outside roared harder, and inside the estate, tension simmered, unbroken and undeniable. By afternoon, the storm had become a spectacle. White curtains swirling against glass, wind thundering through the pines, and the estate glowing brighter to defy the cold. Staff carried trays through marble halls. Chandeliers shimmered as if someone had polished each crystal for hours. The winter gala was still happening, because of course it would. Men like him refused cancellation. They bent the world instead. She descended the grand stairs slowly, fingertips grazing the polished banister. Someone had laid out a dress for her, black, simple, impossibly elegant, and she'd chosen to wear it, half out of curiosity and half out of stubbornness. The lace at the sleeves felt like a secret. In the foyer, guests arrived in clusters, shedding coats lined with fur and cashmere, their laughter echoing through vaulted ceilings. Champagne flutes clinked. Diamonds caught the firelight. He stood at the center of it all, as unavoidable as the storm outside. Power settled on him like a tailored suit, silent, magnetic, almost predatory. Today, his composure wasn't cold, it was watchful. He saw her instantly, and for a heartbeat, the room blurred. Just him, and the way his gaze traveled from her throat to her hands, then back to her eyes as if deciding something. But for her, the gala was revelation. Whispers threaded between guests like thin silver wires, his business, his fortune, his impossible reach. The man she'd spent the night before teasing in the kitchen, brushing past in the corridor, was not merely wealthy. He shaped markets, dictated headlines. Realization pooled slow and inevitable. No wonder the staff bowed without being asked. No wonder he moved as if every hallway belonged to him. Despite the hum of luxury, a complication unfolded. The musicians hadn't arrived. Snow had trapped them somewhere past the border, and without music, the gala felt brittle. Conversation without rhythm. A man in a velvet jacket complained. A woman sighed dramatically. Someone joked about silence being bad for investment morale. Her fingers curled. Violin cases sat unopened in the music room upstairs. She could pretend not to notice. She could stay invisible at the edge of the glittering crowd, but something in her, pride or hunger or sheer defiance, pushed her forward. Minutes later, a small hush fell as she took her place near the fireplace. With nothing more than one of the estate's own violins and the nerve to play it, the first note unfurled like smoke, and then the room softened. Conversations died away. Heads turned. Sound filled the structure, warm and bright, weaving around crystal and candelabra until even the storm seemed to listen. He watched from across the hall, not politely, possessively, as if the music belonged to him too, as if he'd claimed discovery of a secret he wasn't ready to share. When she finished, applause erupted, genuine, startled, infused with admiration. She lowered the bow, flushed from adrenaline rather than applause. The guests swarmed with compliments, and she endured them gracefully, though her glance kept straying toward him. His expression had changed. Less control, more heat. Something edged and territorial. Later, when the crowd drifted toward the ballroom for one last toast, he crossed to her. No grand gesture, just proximity, as though gravity drew him. His hand found her lower back with the ease of someone who never asked for permission. He offered his arm. She hesitated, then took it. Dancing wasn't discussed. It simply happened. The waltz was slow, almost too intimate. The scent of his cologne lingered close, mixing with champagne and cedar. Every turn reduced distance until her breath brushed the edge of his throat. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The tension did instead, thrumming between them, tugging equilibrium apart thread by thread. By the time the last guest departed, luxury had become a quiet echo. Coats gathered, engines started, laughter fading into snowfall. Staff sealed the doors and dimmed the chandeliers. Only embers in the fireplace and the storm outside remained constant. In the emptied ballroom, they stood facing each other, neither quite stepping away. Something unspoken pressed against both of them. Desire no longer coy, restraint fraying at the edges. Control hadn't broken yet, but it wasn't far from surrender. Not anymore. And as the storm swallowed the world beyond the windows, the night shifted. Their story was no longer coincidence or inconvenience. It was inevitable. The storm didn't ease overnight. If anything, the wind sharpened, as though nature was determined to keep the estate sealed off from the rest of the world. By morning, snow buried the terraces and sculpted the balconies in white drifts. Inside, the heat rose and fireplaces sparked to life, as if the house itself approved of confinement. They passed each other in the corridors with the solemnity of diplomats and the spark of rivals. She attempted neutrality. He countered with subtle provocations. A comment brushed just close enough to be teasing. A glance that lingered a fraction too long. A touch disguised as guidance. Neither apologized for it. Neither wanted to. She found sanctuary in the library first. Leather, old books, and thick carpets muffling every step. Shelves stretched upward in towering rows, and the scent of paper and cedar settled her pulse. She traced titles with the tips of her fingers, trying to read, failing to absorb a single word. The storm made its presence known through occasional shivers across the windows. He appeared at the threshold without announcement. Men like him never seemed to need doors. They simply existed wherever they chose. His voice was low when he spoke, neither commanding nor casual, something between. Their conversation felt like a match strike, controlled at first, then unexpectedly bright. He asked why she played. She asked why he didn't dance at his own gala. He smiled without softness, sharp, edged, a touch arrogant. She refused to be impressed, which only deepened his interest. They pressed deeper into each other's histories, picking at threads with curiosity that bordered on hunger. Later in the music room, the game changed. She practiced bow, moving deft and sure, while he stood behind her. He didn't touch, not at first. His presence was its own form of contact, warm and close enough to shape her breath. When he finally did reach for her, it was under the pretense of posture correction, hand at her shoulder, palm guiding her wrist, the slightest pressure at her waist. Nothing improper, everything charged. Her pulse betrayed her. So did her inhale. He noticed, control strained in both directions. They circled each other for hours with no resolution, only escalation. The storm trapped them, and in turn, they trapped themselves in a seduction neither had named aloud. By evening, tension tugged at every corner of the estate. Staff had retreated to their wing, firelight flickered in every room, and the long corridors seemed designed for secrets. She made her way to the study to escape the weight of it all, but he followed, without meaning to, without stopping himself. Words gave way to bolder gestures, teasing accusation, amused defiance, the heat of proximity, when jealousy flared, unprovoked, irrational, undeniable. It surprised them both. Someone at the gala had flirted, barely worth remembering, yet the memory made his jaw tighten in a way that felt both territorial and involuntary. She stepped closer, not backing away from the sharp edge of desire. He countered, breath warm against her cheek, hand sliding to the small of her back, as though fate had written the motion centuries before. The first touch of lips wasn't polite. It wasn't measured or rehearsed. It was hesitation breaking like ice under too much weight. The kiss deepened, slow at first, then hungry, then impossibly tender. Her fingers curled in his shirt. His hands framed her face, careful despite the heat. There was nothing rushed, nothing careless, just surrender finally on both sides. From there, the world became firelight, warmth, and the slow unveiling of intimacy. Clothing stayed mostly in place, but boundaries didn't. Their breaths mingled, their bodies pressed close, and the study, normally a place for decisions and contracts, became a sanctuary for vulnerability. They learned the shape of each other through touch, through sighs, through the quiet confessions spoken against skin rather than air. When exhaustion stole the last defenses, he lifted her as though she weighed nothing, carrying her through the warm halls to his room. Sheets whispered as they lay down, and desire softened into something almost reverent. They fell asleep together, limbs entwined, hearts racing, control finally abandoned to the storm outside and to each other. Light seeped slowly through the frost-fingered windows, painting the room in soft, pale gold. The fire had burned low, leaving a faint warmth that clung to the edges of the bed. Elena stirred, fingers brushing the edge of the sheets, heart still thrumming with the memory of the night. Laurent was already awake, propped on one elbow, dark eyes watching her, like he was cataloging the smallest shift in her expression. The storm outside had softened to a whisper, but inside, a different storm lingered. One made of quiet understanding and unspoken promises. She turned slightly, trying to create distance, but the mattress betrayed her intentions, and warmth pressed against her back, reminded her how completely they had surrendered to each other hours before. Her pulse quickened, simultaneously thrilled and anxious. "Mornin'," he said softly, the sound roughened by sleep but still commanding. "Mornin'," she whispered, careful to keep her voice steady. He shifted, sitting fully upright, letting a blanket slide across both of them. For a long moment, neither moved. Words were unnecessary. The room held the echo of everything they had shared. Touches, confessions, the storm of desire finally given form. Finally, she broke the silence. "I should go." His gaze caught hers immediately, intense, almost pleading. "Already? I have commitments, auditions, rehearsals, life outside these walls." Her tone was firm, but beneath it trembled the faintest edge of regret. He exhaled slowly, as though letting go of something that had never been his to keep. Yet his hand brushed her arm. lingering, reluctant to release. You leave today, but he paused, eyes dark and deliberate. We will meet again. Her breath caught. Again. Yes. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. New York, 15 days. Your concert. You promised me a performance. Once the world outside no longer hates snowstorms. She gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. 15 days. Fine. But I won't let you distract me. His lips curved, almost teasingly. I'll try not to, but I can't make promises about my own control. They shared a quiet laugh, fragile, warm, the tension easing just enough to make the goodbye bearable. Yet it wasn't farewell, not truly. It was the promise of fire and desire postponed, a spark saved for the future. She dressed quickly, gathering her things, her movements efficient but tinged with lingering awareness of his presence. He watched, silent, powerful, and impossibly alluring, letting her leave while he fought the urge to pull her back into the warmth of the estate. At the door, she hesitated. The snow had softened to a gentle fall, each flake catching the early light. 15 days, she said again, almost as a reassurance to herself. 15 days, he echoed. His hand brushed hers lightly, a touch meant to anchor, to mark her in memory, to hint at the intensity yet to come. She stepped into the snow, violin case in hand, heart still racing from the night, the storm, and the man who had broken both of their carefully maintained controls. Laurent watched from the doorway until she disappeared into the white snowflakes catching in her hair, the cold attempting to rival the warmth they had shared. But he knew it couldn't, not truly, and 15 days would be far too long before he saw her again. By the time Elena's car rolled onto the cleared highway, the mountains had softened under a blanket of fresh snow. The storm was over, leaving only silence and the crisp scent of ice and pine. The world beyond the estate seemed quieter, almost fragile, like it had been waiting for her to leave before returning to ordinary life. Her hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, though her mind wasn't on driving. The memory of the night at the estate clung to her, the warmth of the fire, the brush of his hands, the way he had watched her play the violin, the electric tension of every hallway, every stolen glance, even the sound of the tires crunching over the snow seemed to echo the rhythm of her pulse, fast, irregular, alive. She had left him at the doorway, yet he wasn't gone. Every inch of the St. Moritz estate had left its mark. Every encounter a spark she couldn't extinguish. The thought of him sitting there, our dark eyes steady on the road she had taken, made her fingers flex on the wheel without realizing it. Laurent, meanwhile, returned to the great hall of his estate. The fire smoldered low, and the house felt impossibly quiet. His gaze lingered on the door she had passed through, the one that had closed between them with too much finality. The memory of her warmth, her defiance, the way she had surrendered, yet maintained a spark of independence, weighed heavily on him. He moved through the halls almost unconsciously, retracing moments from the night, her laugh echoing in the library, the soft sighs during the dance, the way her hair had brushed against his shoulder in the music room. He knew the rules, understood the lines he shouldn't cross, yet each memory chipped away at restraint. The thought of 15 days before seeing her again in New York was both tantalizing and maddening. 15 days to anticipate, to remember, to ache. Elena's car disappeared over the ridge, the mountains swallowing her silhouette, but he felt the ghost of her presence in every corner of the house. The storm had ended, but its echoes remained, white drifts outside, fire embers inside, and the undeniable imprint of desire between them. For Elena, the drive was quiet, reflective, even contemplative. She rehearsed the music she'd play in New York, but her thoughts kept straying. To him, to the estate, to the brief surrender they had shared. Her pulse still remembered the way he had claimed her attention, even if only for one night. She thought about the deal they had made, a meeting in New York, 15 days from now. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't forever. But it was enough to keep the fire alive. And somehow, that knowledge made the world feel both larger and smaller at once. Larger because the universe still held possibilities. Smaller because her mind was entirely occupied by the memory of him. By the time she reached her hotel for the night, the snow had faded from the roads, replaced by the quiet hum of civilization. But the heat she carried, memory, desire, anticipation, would not fade. It followed her to the door of her room, past the luggage she stacked, into the quiet hours when the only sound was her own heartbeat, and Laurent, standing by the window of his estate, watched the horizon long after she had disappeared. He didn't move. He did not breathe audibly. He simply held the memory of her, waiting, counting, and planning. 15 days until New York, until the next performance, until she returned to him. For now, desire lingered. Control had slipped away, but the promise of reunion made the weight almost bearable. The storm had passed, but the fire between them was just beginning. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's story. Good night and sweet dreams.